think for me, the joy is movement as a means of inquiry, as opposed to it being so dogmatic. And so I'm always trying to, figure out how my language can appropriately reflect that to the best of my ability, with an understanding that not everything I say or not everything that any of us says is going to apply to everyone or be perfect, but that we're being present and, paying attention and questioning why. Why are we saying the things that we are saying? Because we were just taught and that's all we know. And to, be inquisitive yourself and think about why you might be saying that.
Welcome to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. If you are returning listeners, thank you so much for coming back to listen to this week's podcast. And if you're new, welcome to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I live in Long Beach, California, and I'm a full-time yoga teacher. I started this podcast because I wanted to speak with and share the stories of other full-time yoga teachers across the world, to get inspired and to learn from them and hear about their journey and challenges that they face and they overcame to be where they are at in their teaching career. I do interview mostly full-time yoga teachers just because I am a full-time yoga teacher and I'm just curious to see how other people do it and the journey of how they got to where they are. But I do still interview part-time teachers and also people who may not be teaching yoga classes, but are working in the yoga world and following their passion and doing what they love and making this into their lifestyle and living. So I hope you're enjoying all of my episodes. Right now, I'm doing a 3-part series with Karen. This is going to be third of the 3-part series where we are talking about debunking yoga cues. So different cues that we may hear a lot in the yoga studio or yoga classes. Cues that maybe we used to say that we no longer say, and we discuss why and what we might choose to say instead. So I hope you've been enjoying our series. The first of the series was about shoulders. Second of the series was about the spine and pelvis and tailbone and sit bones. And this week we are talking about knees mainly, but also shins, ankles. So I hope you're enjoying this series. I've been getting a lot of great feedback on the series. Every time I get to have a conversation with Karen, it's always fun and also informative. So I hope you're also enjoying and getting the information from these conversations that we are having. Little bit of update. I just finished teaching the 4th weekend of Smart Flow 200-hour teacher training in Laguna Niguel, Orange County of Southern California. And that was the halfway mark. So it's 8 weekends where we meet every other weekend. That's how this teacher training is formatted. And we just finished the 4th one, which means we're halfway there. And I feel great that we have made it halfway. We still have another halfway to go, but I feel very grateful to have such an amazing group for our 200-hour teacher training, the Smart Flow teacher training. I couldn't have asked for a better group. And every time I teach or I am part of teacher training, it really makes me feel certain that I am on the right path and how I love teaching teachers, or I love teaching people who really want to deepen their knowledge of yoga, not just the physical, but all the layers of yoga. I have been studying the Yoga Sutras quite hard in the last 2 months, and I am also having a whole new appreciation on Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which I always have such a huge appreciation for that philosophy book, but I feel like more I learn about it, more I have a deeper appreciation for that book. So if you have any Yoga Sutras of Patanjali translation or narration that you really like, feel free to send them my way, titles and the author, so I can look them up. Currently I have addiction of keep buying different narrations and translations of Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and I'm loving reading different translations and trying to see a bigger picture and then kind of narrow in on what feels aligned from reading so many different translations. So if you also have a similar addiction to me of buying and learning and reading so many different Yoga Sutras book, I would love to hear what's your favorite one, so we can kind of compare. I can share with you the ones I like as well. Before we get started on this week's episode, I do have one announcement. For my mentorship program for yoga teachers, once a month I bring in guest teachers to teach a workshop. And for April, I have amazing Hannah coming to teach workshop on Zoom called Bringing Trauma-Informed Yoga Practices to Your Classes. And Hannah Lee is a licensed social worker and also certified yoga teacher, and she teaches at an amazing yoga studio in Chicago called Room to Breathe, where they merge psychotherapy and yoga together. And she is going to be perfect person to teach this workshop. So if you are listening and you are a yoga teacher who's interested in learning a little bit more about trauma-informed yoga, maybe want to make sure you're teaching a class that is trauma-informed, or you want to teach a yoga classes at places that is trauma-informed, this workshop is for you. It is on Zoom on April 5th, which is Saturday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. Hour and a half, and it'll be recorded. So if you want to sign up and you cannot make it live, I will send you the recording so you can watch the recording at the timing that works for you. So trauma-informed is a popular phrase, but what does it really mean and how does it really show up in a yoga class? So you can explore these questions with Hannah in this workshop. We are going to discuss how choice, autonomy, and thoughtful language can increase accessibility in all yoga classes, and why these values are important regardless of the population that you teach. And you also get a chance to discuss and leave the workshop with tangible strategies to bring into your classes. So if trauma-informed yoga is something you've been interested in or you want to kind of dig deeper into, this will be a great intro class for that. This workshop with Hannah can be such a great intro into that. And if you want to deepen your knowledge after this, you are welcome to continue learning from Hannah or Room to Breathe, which they offer a lot of amazing workshop and trainings on Zoom. I am also trauma-informed certified. I did my trauma-informed training back in 2018, I believe, with the organization called Uprising Yoga with Jill. And it was a very eye-opening training for me. It really changed the way I think about how I use my language and how I show up as a yoga teacher. And the skill I learned and continue to learn from trauma-informed yoga world is very crucial and beneficial to the way I teach. I know it makes me a better teacher. So if you're interested, I'll put the link on the show notes. The workshop is on Saturday, April 5th from 2 to 3:30 Pacific time. Anyone can join from any time zone. It is $40. It is free for my people in my mentorship group. And if you're not part of the mentorship group, it is $40. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to message me and let me know. Otherwise, that's all the announcement I have for this week. I hope you enjoy our conversation about debunking the yoga cues on knees and ankles and shins. And I'll speak to you on the other side.
Welcome back, Karen, for another episode of us talking about cues and anatomy and some of the cues that we no longer use or we no longer really agree with. But we all have said these cues before, so we're not trying to demonize it. We've been there, and
upon further education and learning more, these are some things that we, decided that it's not necessary anymore. So we want to talk about knees, maybe some shins and ankle stuff today. Let's start with pigeon pose. Pigeon pose. It's
pigeon,
one of the
whatever you call
very
it.
popular. Like, people love that pose.
They really do. They really do. If I don't give it to them, they'll just start doing it themselves.
Yeah, it's probably like most requested pose. So I guess one thing I see people doing a lot in pigeon pose is a lot of people really, really, really trying hard to put their front shin bone. This is reclined pigeon we're talking about. The front shin bone, they're really trying to make that shin bone parallel to the top edge of your mat. And I don't think most human beings can do that. I mean, I'm sure some people can, but most people, their hips not going to be able to allow the shins parallel to the top of the mat.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how or why that became a thing. The only thing that I can think about is that then when you're practicing what's called double pigeon sometimes, or fire log pose, is that you do, at least what I've been cued is that you do cue the shins parallel on top of each other. Because then otherwise honestly, most of the time I just teach like Sukhasana instead, like crossed at the shins. I'm not trying to get the shins parallel. But I think the idea is that it creates more stretch in the, because why are we doing pigeon? To, at least for me, the understanding is that we're trying to stretch the outer hip muscles, in particular the piriformis.
Yeah.
A little small booty muscle in there. But I don't think that your shin needs to be parallel to feel. I'm 99.9% sure from my experience. I'm almost 100% sure, but I don't want to say I'm sure of everything all the time. Most people feel the stretch when their shin is not parallel.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most people cannot physically get their shins to become parallel. So when I see people kind of forcing it, it makes me kind of like I want them to stop forcing it, because, if I try to force that, like my knee will take the little tweak or something, because I just don't have that much range of motion in my hips.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If your hip joint is if there's no more motion, if there's no more range in your hip joint, sometimes the joint nearest to it will move instead, which in particular, I think in that pose, especially if you're flexing your spine over your leg, is going to be your knee. But I think, it's that range in the hip, that much external rotation, I don't think is accessible for most people's bodies.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't really ever say shin parallel to the top of the mat, or I might try to, if I see people doing it, I might say like, not everyone can bring their shins parallel to the floor, and that's normal. So don't feel like you have to try or you have to force that. That's, that's not where we're trying to, I don't know. I guess, I don't want to say that's not where we're trying to get, because if some people can get there without any harm, there's nothing wrong with that. But I do want to like debunk that when I'm teaching it, because I just feel like people feel like that's where they need to go.
Start pulling their shin forward, to make it parallel.
Yeah,
I think for me, I would be maybe more concerned with the position of where the leg is on the mat, because I definitely think we want to encourage whichever leg is forward, that knee to be more in line with the hip, or even slightly outside of the hip, so that we can encourage external rotation at the hip joint. Because once the leg moves more towards abduction, I don't believe you're getting as much of a stretch in the piriformis that way.
That's true.
Adduction. Wait. Yeah.
Adduction, adduction. That's true.
Yeah,
and
I know, that's how I always remember it. I'm like, adduction plus moving towards center.
Moving into the center.
Yeah.
I see that probably with people with with more limited range of motion in their external rotation. They have.
Yeah, but they could just do figure 4.
Yeah, figure 4.
So, and then you don't have the weight of your body on your joints.
Exactly. You offer all the options, but we can't control which option they're going to take.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, before when I was a little BB teacher, I don't think I ever offered figure 4 as an option I would just teach half pigeon, and everyone would just do it. And some people would probably be suffering more than they need to, because we are trying to free ourselves from our self-imposed suffering. But it's funny because now giving people options, even if they know it, speaking, vocalizing the options, I think really encourages people to make that choice, even if they might know it. Just verbalizing that option can encourage people. And I'm always surprised in a good way at how many people just come onto their backs and do figure 4 instead.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Giving options. But sometimes I feel as a teacher, almost I need to do a little bit more than just offer different options. I almost have to like do one of the options myself. Like I feel like some people feel like they have more permission to go do the other options if they see me as a teacher doing it, or they see a couple other people in the room also take that option. So I try to, whenever I give options and if I'm going to demo it, I might just stay in the, the second or third options I offered. That is like a less typical variation or less popular variation, to kind of hoping that this will give permission to some students in the room to also try another variation that might feel better in their body.
I actually love that, because I feel like myself too, I'll always demo like the most complex version of the pose. Because I'm like, oh, people need to see this one. I don't need to worry about the other ones. But yeah, it's actually really good. It's actually a really good point.
Thank you. I learned that from accessible yoga training.
Yeah.
Jivana Heyman and all of them. They always say, you can still show all the options, but then if you are going to go into it as a teacher, to choose not the most complicated variation of the option to doing in front of the students. But I want to talk a little bit more about pigeon pose. What do you think about flexing your ankles to protect your knees in pigeon pose?
It doesn't do that. Yeah. I don't believe, as far as I know, that flexing your ankle does anything to protect your knee. I don't think. As far as I know, I want to say that one I got from Jenny Rawlings.
I have heard Jason Crandall talk about it as well. He's like, there's nothing wrong with flexing the knees, flexing the ankles. You can do it, but it's not really protecting the knees by doing it.
Yeah. And so I think this idea that, and again, when we're new, we tend to speak in this way that's sort of very like, flex your ankle to protect your knee. I'm helping you protect yourself. I get it. I probably still say stuff. I was going to curse, but I'm not going to do it. I probably still say stuff that makes me sound like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, ankle flexion doesn't support your knee. You could flex or you could point. I think sometimes I like the feeling of flexing at my ankle, like I can reach my inner heel away. We don't necessarily need to tell people to do certain things to protect themselves, because again, I don't love this idea of speaking to the body like it's something that's easily broken.
Yes.
Our bodies are very resilient.
Mm-hmm. Kind of moving away from fear-based cueing. I hear that with lower back, like, oh, draw the belly button towards the spine to protect your back or something like that. I hear that too.
I think I listened to a podcast that was actually talking about the position of the pelvis, which is really interesting. And if neutral pelvis was more important, like what we just talked about before, then tucked pelvis and this and this and this. And the studies that they've done have actually said that it doesn't matter, which is like, so we don't even need to tell people what to do with their pelvis to protect their back. But yeah, and I think in particular with flexing the ankle to protect the knee is just like one of those ones, at least for me, that I heard all the time when I was taking yoga and when I did my teacher training. So it almost just becomes like you go into pigeon pose and you're like, okay, everyone, half pigeon, take your right shin forward and flex your ankle to protect your knee and come on down. And it almost just becomes part of like your language that you're saying. Mm-hmm. But for me, when I get caught up in those moments of just saying things without thinking, I really use it as a reminder that I need to drop into presence as a yoga teacher and not just phone at home. And here's the thing. I know we teach a lot, so I'm not saying that every class I'm 100% perfectly present, but when I do find myself kind of slipping into those patterns, I need to also bring consciousness to the things that I am also unconscious about, because that's my yoga practice as a teacher leading the class.
Yeah. And I think I still sometimes say flex your ankle. And my ankle automatically flexes in those poses, like chair pose with the figure 4 chair pose or figure 4 laying on the back. I think it's just like ingrained in me. But yeah, when I learned that, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Nothing's going to happen to my knee, whether I flex or not.
Yeah, because your knee's strong. Your knee can do a lot of things. Yeah. It can also pass your ankle.
Yes. And that's another one I wanted to bring up with this similar conversation is like another one I hear is make sure your knee doesn't pass your ankle to protect your knee, or knee must be over the ankle to protect your knee. So I think that is another slightly fear-based language of to protect your knee, meaning if you don't do this, it's dangerous for your knee. And we're talking about poses like warrior 2, warrior 1, crescent, or lunge, where anytime the front foot forward, we're told to make sure it's like in this 90-degree angle. And I mean, I will still say like knee over ankle in some of the poses, but knowing that it's not dangerous to go beyond it, especially unless you have pain to go. If you go beyond it, there's a pain there. Obviously, then don't go there.
Yes, yeah, I think that's important, and I think that you can train your body to do any movement. Do I think I need to hang out in knee past ankle all the time? Probably not. Do I think I need to be in knee over ankle all the time? Right? Probably not. I think, again, it's just one of those things where it really depends. If I'm teaching something like Skandasana, where there's a lot of requirement of the body, so a lot of ankle dorsiflexion, a lot of knee flexion, a lot of hip flexion, and lateral rotation in the hip, I will sometimes prep the ankle because I don't think that there's enough like feet. At least maybe it's just because I have ankles that are like not great. I feel like sometimes the ankles need to be prepped more than sometimes what we do in yoga. I'll, do a low lunge where I'll have them try to keep the heel down and shift forward and back and let the knee pass the ankle to see how much sort of ankle dorsiflexion they can get in there. And again, nobody's knees are exploding unless they have something right going on with their knee or they're experiencing pain. I think it's perfectly okay to let that happen. I also just think, it's one of those things where, of course, again, we can't tell people nothing. Just like, just do warrior 2 and just bend your knee any amount. It's not lost on me that even like the feeling of having my ankle and my knee and my hip like sort of in their place with the joints a little bit more quote unquote aligned feels good. I mean, I know Annie talks about that as far as like energy.
Oh yes,
flowing.
Yeah, and line energy. Yeah, so I think that's kind of brings up interesting point of what I sometimes think about is how, like, because we still want students to get to somewhat of a shape, whatever we're teaching. And we're not talking about exact, it has to be one right way to get into this shape. There's a variation within the shape of the pose that students can find. But then how do we teach the students to get to that shape without like getting detailed about like this is where it must be. So sometimes, like a knee over ankle or stacking the knees over ankle, it makes it kind of easier for us teachers to kind of teach it. But like you said before, like Skandasana or even Malasana, deep squat, or even when you climb up a stairs, like our knees are constantly going past our ankles. So I feel like it's part of functional human movement that knees do go beyond the ankles. And
I think it's just the language of like, don't let your knee pass your ankle in warrior 2 because it will hurt your knee.
Yeah.
When that's not actually a reality.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's the fear-based language of to protect your knee, make sure your knees don't go beyond the ankle. That's kind of the languaging we hear a lot. And I don't think that's necessarily necessary way. It may not be a helpful way to cue things because we don't want to plant fears in students' body.
Yeah, fear is not necessarily a good motivator for things.
Yes. And I guess going with the theme of knees, what about tree pose?
Yeah, no foot on your knee in tree pose. I said that forever. I remember being told, like, you cannot put your foot on your knee pose, or put your foot on your knee pose. Put your foot on your knee in tree pose.
Yeah, it's usually...
And it's funny because I heard it, and I think I heard it like when I was first practicing because it protects your knee again. But I think you can hurt your knee if you're standing and someone kicks you from the side, if you get hit with like a force. But your foot on your knee is not going to harm your knee. Your knee is, again, much more resilient than that. Yeah. And I even remember a teacher saying, like, you have that wonderful little arch in your foot that just fits right on your knee. It's like it was meant for it.
Yeah, that's so true.
No, I think there might be something to say, at least for me, when I'm teaching tree pose, is that I'm pressing my leg towards my foot as much as my foot is pressing into my leg in that pose, just to, feel myself centered. So maybe people were saying that because they didn't just want the foot kind of like pushing the knee and the hip out to the side. Again, it's hard for me to kind of think about where all these cues come from. But when I hear cues like that, I'm always wondering, where did it arise from?
Yeah. And I guess that, if you're just pushing below the knee or above the knee, I'm sure the cue came from somebody thought that was slightly a safer route, I guess. But it's not, like you said, it's not really necessary. And your knee can take that force, like it's not like, I think ACL and LCL injuries happen in like basketball court or playing soccer, like really fast movement.
Force. Yeah.
Really strong force that pushes in that way, knee in that direction. So in the yoga class, most likely, most people are going to be fine.
Yeah. So for me, if I'm teaching this, I just say bring your foot up your leg anywhere that feels like you can balance. I may also have people think about where they can sort of bring their foot up to find a little bit more levelness in their pelvis, so both sides of their waist are along. So again, you might start class with them having them feel out where their pelvis is in space. And not everyone can feel their pelvis right. So sometimes I'll just have them think about the length and the side body. Yeah. And then bring the foot up to the height that you can feel length in both sides of your body.
Yeah, I love that. I like that alternative you offer, or different cues, different way of saying students to get into that pose.
I'm an overthinker, so it's my superpower when it comes to certain things.
No, I think these are all great. I think we gave a lot of great tips in this episode as well as the last two episodes about just, getting people to think about certain cues that they've been hearing and they might be saying it all over and over again. And also like hearing me and Karen talk about different ways we could possibly say these kind of cues, and hopefully they're listening and getting some ideas on like, oh, okay, like I like the way Karen said that. Like that's very open-ended and, it's just not saying this is the right and this is the wrong way to do things. Yeah, I think these conversations so important. And Karen and I always talk about this kind of conversation when we get together because we just love to geek out about yoga all the time. But is there anything else you want to add to this week's episode about knees, shins, ankles?
I just think that, and we've talked about this before, but I think for me, the joy is movement as a means of inquiry, as opposed to it being so dogmatic. And so I'm always trying to, figure out how my language can appropriately reflect that to the best of my ability, with an understanding that not everything I say or not everything that any of us says is going to apply to everyone or be perfect, but that we're being present and, paying attention and questioning why. Why are we saying the things that we are saying? Because we were just taught and that's all we know. And to, be inquisitive yourself and think about why you might be saying that.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good way to wrap up, like really question some of the cues you've been saying over and over or you've been told to say, and continue to learn, keep learning from different teachers out there. There's so many great trainings, workshops, but there's also a lot of free resources out there. So this information definitely can be found online out there without paying huge amount of money. So we encourage everyone listening to explore and keep learning about the bodies and also question some of the cues that you've been saying. Just inquiry is so important. Well, thank you, Karen. I really appreciated this conversation and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, this has been so fun. Thank you, Reika.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. This was a 3-part series of conversations I had with Karen. I'm calling this 3-part series Yoga Cues Debunked. The first one was about the shoulders, second one was about the spine and pelvis, and the third one you just heard was about the knees, ankles, and shins. If you're enjoying this format of podcast episodes where it's more informational and educational and shorter, please let me know and I can create more episodes like this. Like I said earlier, you can always reach out to me, ask me questions, or Give me feedback on the podcast. I'm most active on Instagram. My handle is @ReikaYoga, or you can message me on my website, www.reikayoga.com. I'll put the links to both of those on the show notes, as well as how you can reach out to Karen. I would really appreciate it if you can like, subscribe, star, review, or do anything you are able to do from whatever platform you're listening to this podcast from. But most importantly, share this with your friend. Share this episode or this podcast with someone you think might enjoy this podcast, and that would mean a lot to me. One more reminder is that the workshop on Zoom that's coming up for yoga teachers called Bringing Trauma-Informed Yoga Practices to Your Yoga Classes. And that'll be taught by Hannah, the guest teacher for April. That's on April 5th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. I'll put the link to register for that workshop on the show notes, so feel free to check it out, and feel free to write to me, message me to ask me any questions. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye.